The Fly, Chapter 9. The Cause and Nature of Light. March 22, 1842. In the foregoing communication, we have heard our fly, as the first animal, buzz around behind a newly developed planet. It will hardly be necessary to explain this figure of speech, yet it can be included for the sake of many weaker ones. That this is only in time and not also in space, as if someone should imagine a giant swarm of flies, like a comet's tail, chasing after such a planet. Also, this is to be understood in a timely sense, how out of one preparatory period, a more developed and a more complete period follows. This we already know, but you will now think, what higher and more valuable victory can we get out of our poor fly? For we have seen its origin, following this revelation, and we have found that regardless of all the wonderful and extraordinary happenings, at the end, there is still nothing more and nothing less than the usual fly, corresponding to God's order, the likes of which we see plenty of during the summertime. See, that is a well-advised remark, and will be useful as a basis in erecting a strong new building. But before we begin this structure, we have to proceed with a strong wall, which will protect us well from an attack. For otherwise our poor fly may not come out of it so well, especially in these days in which there are so many educated and deeply scientific fly-catchers. But where shall we raise our fortifications? Well, that will not be hard to figure out. Since most misconceptions and hypotheses are where the short-sighted human understanding is least allowed to look, that is, into the light sphere of reality, there most of the theories will be constructed and, like the French fashion industry, the most recent always prevails. But what is this about which, in this scholarly age, there are almost as many theories as there are scholars? Behold, the answer is and remains in the light. Therefore, we will take a look first at the light itself. Then this will be our fortification, and only then go on to our fly. We want to put forth the main question. What is light itself, and how does it propagate? To demonstrate this, it will not be necessary to name any of the existing erroneous theories. We will set up our explanation, and this will serve everyone as a touchstone to test all the alleged theories concerning how much noble or ignoble metal they contain. So then, what is light? To understand light, as it appears in time and space, thoroughly, you must view it as neither completely material nor completely spiritual, but as a material-spiritual unit, and see it as a set polarity in which the spiritual part constitutes the positive pole, and the material part is the negative pole. But this polarity is so positioned that it does not act as front and back, but as the inner and outer, with the inner being the positive and the outer the negative pole. But how do these polarities appear as light? See, this difficulty shall soon be removed. When you take a so-called flint stone and strike it with hardened iron, you will see a number of sparks flying at the spot where the iron hits the flint. These sparks are light. Where did they get their luminescence? From the stone, the iron, or from both? Here it is not necessary to further mention that by this act the sparks originate solely from the iron, from which the outermost little pieces were torn off by the hard stone and kindled. The little particles of air enclosed in the pores of the iron could not evade the pressure caused by the striking action. They kindled, and in turn set detached iron particles into a hot, glowing white state. This we knew. But how is this compressed air ignited, and what is the illumination within the act of ignition? Here the matter can no longer be explained differently except to repeat again that half of the air is nothing but the material body for the intellectual spirits contained therein. The physicists would rather hear me say free unbound force instead of spirits. But since we want to be thorough, instead of taking the attribute of iron, we will take the thing affected with the attribute, which is the spirit itself, or, since we are dealing with many spirits instead of just one, the spirits themselves. Having that firmly in our mind, we can follow unerringly the trail to this very thing, and then so perceive it. Since spirit is a positive polarity power, it strives continually for unbounded freedom, and is quiet in its bound state only as long as it doesn't experience any unusual impairment from its negative polarity, or, still more understandable, from its encasement or hole. But if it suffers any kind of pressure from without, the spirit is immediately awakened from its sphere of confinement and makes its existence known by expanding. This phenomenon is then known to you as light. We have come this far, but nevertheless everyone will still say, "That may be right, but we still don't know what the actual light in and by itself is." But I say, just a little more patience, for as you all know, a mature oak tree does not fall with one blow. We will come to grips with the actual illumination. What then is this illumination? An example will make it clearer to you. What do you see when an arrogant person receives a humiliating blow to his ego? He becomes enraged, and in his rage his whole body will begin to shake. His eyes begin to glow as though an iron forge were behind them, and his hair bristles on all sides. If he is in the company of like-minded individuals, they too become enraged, not in the same intensity, but according to the degree of friendship. I am of the opinion that this scene needs no further clarification, but you need only to observe an army of soldiers, and you cannot miss this outflow of anger, or this war hunger which grips thousands and thousands and hurls them unto the bloody battle. Now, if you think about this a little, we will have our illumination as good as fully explained. For the spirit, as positive polarity encased in the negative polarity, receiving a blow, becomes enraged, which in this case is an emerging awareness of its captivity. And with this awareness comes a great desire to expand or make itself free. But since the outer negative polarity is so constructed that it expands to a certain extent, but is otherwise indestructible, or rather unbreakable. The spirit inside expands as far as it can, but since it cannot break through, it withdraws quickly. But then, in erroneous judgment, tries again with renewed vigour to break through its hull, an act which some spirits can repeat many thousands of times per second. This act is called rage and is accompanied by ever-increasing anger. What is the obvious consequence of this act, which can truly be called war hunger? Nothing else but that the other, still calm spirits, close to such an enraged spirit, perceive this fever, and are set into motion against their inner polarity. This propagation of their shared fever can take place with great speed, since the negative encasement of the spirits of which the air is actually composed lie close together. Now we actually have it all. It is just this feverish activity of such spirits, which is perceived by the eye of animals as well as humans. This perception is actually what you call illumination, for the eye is provided to perceive these most subtle vibrations, and this because the eye is more or less half spirit and half material, and has the same polarity as that which is called light, and therefore receive and feel everything related to it. When any such polarity kindles itself in this manner, then this is the act of illumination. But the illumination itself is nothing but the effect on the surrounding spiritual polarities by the vibration caused by the original spiritual polarity. This propagation affects nearer or further distances depending on the size and degree of the originally kindled spiritual polarity, and sets them, if not into too intense, at least into a perceivable state of rage. The further the surrounding spiritual polarities are from the originally kindled spiritual polarity, the weaker is the response. Now you will say, we understand the illumination, but we do not understand why we see the illuminated objects by their form, and also do not understand the nature of the different kinds of light, such as the light of the sun. Here I will tell you a little more, so that this, too, will no longer be a secret, since the greatest difficulty has already been overcome. You see the actual form of objects, because the solid material corresponding to the forms of the objects resists the formerly discussed propagation, or it is a double return from an object from which it received a counter-thrust. Concerning the light of the sun, its illumination is the same as the familiar spark. The difference is only that the white light stems from the vibrations of love, while the red light stems from the vibrations of rage. And, since the light of the sun originates from the vibrations of love, its propagation is different from that originating from anger. But what constitutes the difference, and how we shall arrive at our victory, will be clearly shown to you next time. And so let us leave it for today.